We back,
We're
back
back.
again. Monty's Gems is back again.
Number 7 this week. It's going to be a good one.
It is going to be a good one. This is going to be your area of expertise in which I know absolutely nothing about. So I'm excited to be able to interview you and ask you all the hard questions.
Yeah, there you go. Last week was a little bit more of you teaching me. This week it's going to be a little bit more of me teaching you,
Yeah, definitely. I know absolutely nothing about aliens,
huh?
which is what this week's topic is all about.
Oh, yeah.
um, But before we get started, we wanted to go and do the things that we've shared at the beginning of the episode to give you guys a spice of that. So, what about you? What have you learned in the last week?
So I was listening to Joe Rogan's podcast with, I don't remember her name, but she's like a wolf researcher, scientist kind of person. And basically they were talking about a phenomenon in like wild animals, or maybe not even wild animals, but the specific example that they gave, I can't remember what he called it. I tried Googling it after, but I didn't write it down when I heard it. But it was basically that on one side of the country, you can run tests with like rats or any animals, and they learn a specific skill. And without necessarily gene similarity, or so like the mice offspring, it's not any of that. It's just a random mouse on the other side of the country. It becomes easier for that mouse to do the same task. But it's just kind of like a phenomenon because the two mice on opposite sides of the country aren't connected at all, but it's just something that once one of the mice on either side of the country is begins to be proficient at, it's easier for the other mouse to actually complete the task at hand, if that makes sense.
Okay, and so what's the theory behind that? How do they learn that? Is it because there's so many mice all over the country when one learns something that it gets spread and shared so quickly that it can reach the other end of the country? Or is it something type of metaphysical thing going on in their minds? Like, what
Yeah, I think
was there a
it's
theory behind that?
yeah, I guess I'm not sure the exact science behind it, but it was just more so they were talking about it more so as like a phenomenon, almost like quantum entanglement almost, if you know what that is.
I
But
don't.
okay, so it's like so like one planet on this side of the universe, and then you take another planet that's like hundreds of thousands of light years away, and they are reacting to each other even though they have no specific connections to one another. And I guess I don't know. I'm not necessarily the one that is well equipped enough to explain any of this. I just kind of thought it was
Yeah.
interesting and something that I learned. But yeah, it was just more so a metaphysical thing. Like they can't really explain it. It was just kind of a phenomenon type thing going on, I
Oh,
guess.
that is really interesting. Do you know like what specifically these, like you said, rats were learning? Like, were they learning to like eat something, or what? Did they give any examples?
Yeah, I guess I don't really know, but I tried looking it up and I couldn't find anything on it, but then again I didn't know. I could go back through the episode and look and listen to what he said, but
Hmm?
they didn't give any specific examples. But I think rats was just an example he was giving, more so the concept of animals in the wild learning traits and stuff like that. So
Okay. Yeah, that is really interesting. I think it's more interesting just to try to get in depth look at it and see like how that actually happens and what the full theory is behind it.
yeah,
But that's in.
one thing that they were talking about was it's just kind of just being adapted more into society, like into cities and stuff like that. You're kind of losing touch with nature, I guess. And it's just
Mhm.
kind of like one of those things, if you don't use it, you lose it. And it's just maybe something that we don't necessarily, a skill that we necessarily have anymore. Maybe it transfers some psychological way, and I don't know, but just something that maybe we're just losing our touch with nature, and that was a skill that we used to have or something like that. That was just kind of what they were talking about, and it was just interesting to me, I guess.
Okay, how they can learn them again or pick up on them,
Yeah,
or their species can kind of be better equipped, even though they're on the opposite side of the country.
right, right.
All right. So, things that I learned this week, I have a few to share. So, I've still been stuck on the whole personality thing, getting through that book, and something I actually spent some time reading today. And one of the things that it was going through is talking about we all tell white lies, and it was talking about how the different personalities lie. So, if you remember last week's episode, we were talking about the doves. Those are the people that are compassionate and loving. Usually, the way that doves tell white lies is they don't lie. They don't want to make anybody unhappy. So if maybe somebody says, "Oh, how does this shirt look on me?" It's like, "Oh, look great." Or "How was dinner?" "Oh, it was great."
Yeah, yeah.
Because they don't want to hurt anything. While sometimes the eagles, who are the leaders, they don't ever want to look like they're wrong. So if they make a mistake, sometimes they're quick to deny making a mistake and stuff like that. So it had those types of things for all of the different personalities. Secondly, it was talking about feedback and how each different type of personality really appreciates feedback. Like doves really appreciate someone telling how they made them feel, whereas like owls, for example, they want to have an in-depth outlook of the feedback in terms of, oh, you like the meal? What was it about the meal that you liked? Like, oh,
Right.
okay.
Huh.
Well, I don't know. Well, no. What was it? So they want a descriptive, where it's just like, oh, it was good. That's just like that type of feedback does not help them at all because they want to be able to take that feedback and then use it next time
Right, right,
to
right.
recreate whatever it was that made you feel good. So it's just really interesting how about, man, so much our personalities and how we communicate, how important it is to really be able to help one another. And then the third thing, I got to go to Disney World this last week with some of the family. And one of our brothers has a young daughter. And so I got to spend a lot of time with her. And it was really cool just to see how much laughter comes from little kids and playfulness. And one thing that I really realized in myself is how much I enjoy physical touch. And Emily, like, always wanted to come. She was coming up to me and was holding my hand. She would grab my hand, or she would come up to me and give me a hug. And it was really, really special. I guess so many times I feel like uh, physical touch has to be, it gets manipulated where it's like, uh, someone asks, you have to ask for a hug, or
Mhm.
you have to ask for these things. It's not someone just coming up to you and showing you the emotion that I think we all feel on a genuine basis. And I don't know if that's because at some point in time as we come into adult lives, we feel insecure about giving people hugs and just like not having to ask for it or ask if it's okay or anything like that. But that felt really, really good, and it was really, really enjoyable to have that closeness with my niece, and it was something I really realized how special that is.
Huh. Wow, that's really cool.
Yeah.
The things you said about the personalities, that is just kind of learning more so which different types take criticisms and uh, feedback in different ways. Like they all take feedback, but preferring it in a different way, I guess, is just something you don't really think about like that. Like, hmm.
Well, no, and I think oftentimes that's what I just have really enjoyed learning more and more about personalities is that so many times we we label people as either being right or wrong, smart or stupid,
Yeah.
just like this. And so many times it's because we're so stuck in our own personalities. And I think our family, specifically, I see it a lot. I would say I grew up somewhat judgmental, but a lot of that judgmentalness comes from just having different personalities than a lot of other people. And the more accepting you are of personalities and the more you can see those things, especially when it comes to creating, other relationships and friends and stuff like that, it's really difficult if you're just structured in one specific personality type, and you don't know how to commute with. And again, this book is called Chameleon. So the whole goal of it is to be a chameleon and be able to use each one of those different personality types at any time. So it gave an example where there was these baby birds going to camp, and the the two birds were had to teach them at camp, and they were going to have a rainy day. So the eagle was going and saying, "Okay, we got to do this." Where the parrot was making a game out of this rainy day that usually nobody likes rainy days, and he was
Hmm.
saying, "So who's going to win at this challenge today?" and they're like, oh, me. And it's like, no, 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 that wasn't good enough. I want to know who's going to win, who's going to be the most creative. So he's getting them excited about this, minute task and how he does it. And so in those instances where, it's a rainy day and there's not much exciting about it, it's those parrots that really can bring the spirit out of people, and they can create that excitement. And so, sometimes it just gives us the opportunity to realize how we can all do that, based on different circumstances. That's what, man, I love learning about personalities. It's amazing, just to see, I think, where I've went wrong in communicating with people of different personalities and how I can do a better job in the future.
Yeah, I mean, yeah, it all comes down to everybody is living a different life with different personalities, and just that's what's so fascinating to me. It's just people in general, just seeing all of their personalities blended into one group of people, and just learning how to communicate best with everybody, and just have live the best life with what you're given, and realize that everybody's living a different life. I don't know. That's just something that's so fascinating to me too. Yeah, I completely understand that.
And I would say one of my biggest struggles inside of our family is that I'm probably the most extroverted.
Yeah.
So I've tried to bring a lot of that extrovertedness out in you guys. And sometimes you guys are just way more calm, like in public settings. Like I'm the goofy one, I'm the loud one. And
Yeah.
so sometimes I feel like I'm too much for you guys, but that's my personality. And so sometimes I have to try to, figure out how to communicate, best with you. Like, for example, this podcast, I wouldn't say we're super different personalities, but I think we're really trying to figure out how to communicate back and forth really good with each other,
Yeah.
to where it doesn't come across like I'm arguing against you or questioning what you're saying, but trying to understand and comprehend, more so, and just communicating more effectively.
Yeah. I can agree with that.
So, all right, guys. Well, this week we're going to hop into the topic of aliens. It's a very well versed topic. Jake is going to be the expert this week, and he's going to start us off by sharing. So, I get Jake. Do you want to share like how you got into this, or do you have some other stuff you want to share first, and then go into that? What do you want to do?
I guess yeah. So basically, how I got into this was, I don't know. Dad was always really conspiracy theory. He was always, and I don't know if you know who Alex Jones is, but he's a very off the wall conspiracy theorist, and he would always watch him and just a bunch of conspiracy theories, like the whole flat Earth thing, and I don't know, just being around it a lot and just seeing it was. I wasn't really necessarily interested in it when he was watching it, but ever since I started listening to Joe Rogan, and you start seeing the because everything's everything is a conspiracy theory. Well, okay. I guess conspiracy theories are only conspiracy theories until they're proven to be true. Like the whole MK Ultra thing. Do you know what MK Ultra is?
I don't, but real quick, I do know who Alex Jones is, and
Okay.
this is a funny story. So I was going to a church, and after one service, everybody in the church went out to their cars, and there was this DVD stuck to everybody's cars, and it was the conspiracy theory on 9/11 that Alex Jones had promoted. And
Oh
so
no.
that's what took us everybody in that church down this bunny trail of all this stuff, and then we got to Bohemian Grove,
Oh
which
yeah, yeah.
I mean, have you heard of that?
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah, okay. So that was I was very into Alex Jones and just learning all this conspiracy theory stuff after that. But and anyways, MK Ultra.
Yeah. Just basically like all conspiracy theories are conspiracy theories until they're actually proven true. And then they're kind of, okay, well, it makes you wonder if this conspiracy theory came to be true. It kind of takes you down that rabbit hole of what else of these conspiracy theories is true. Because, like, the whole MK Ultra thing was basically the CIA was using LSD to mind control. Basically, it was they ran these experiments and they would have these test subjects basically, and they would put them under the effects of LSD, and they would take them through these tasks of basically a hypnosis kind of thing, and then they would be able to control people basically through that. And then there's a book called Chaos by Tom O'Neill, I think, and basically that book is about the MK Ultra thing, which has since I think it's proven to be true. I think there's even documents basically from the CIA saying that this is something that happened. Not necessarily what I'm about to get into, but basically it goes over the Charles Manson family and how the CIA used Charles Manson, and basically that formed a cult, and that cult eventually ended up like murdering people, and just that whole thing started from a CIA quote unquote project. But yeah, that's a whole different conspiracy theory episode if we wanted to go down that.
Okay.
But
Sure.
yeah, it's
Okay.
just conspiracy theories that end up like being true, and then
Okay.
it makes you start to wonder if that conspiracy theory was true and it seemed so off the wall, like that could never happen. Then you look at some other conspiracy theories, it's like, okay, well, what? It just throws you into a whole loop, like what is even true anymore?
Right. And so, what was it about aliens that stuck with you to where it's like, okay, this is a conspiracy theory that I'm going to look into and dive deeper into? What were some of those starting points that maybe intrigued you or stood out to you?
I think for me, it's just exploring space in general. I've always been fascinated by space and astronomy and just looking at other planets. Like I got a telescope a year or two ago and just looking at planets. Like I saw Saturn and its rings for the first time, and I saw the moons orbiting around Saturn through the telescope, and that was just really cool experience for me. And just I don't know, just the idea itself is fascinating to me, I guess.
Wow, that's interesting. I didn't realize that you had seen the moons orbiting around Saturn.
Yeah.
Did you ever like save any of those pictures or
No, I
do you
didn't
have
take
any?
any. I didn't take any pictures. I actually got a. It's like a T-ring adapter, so you can. I have a Canon DSLR camera, and there's an adapter where you can hook it up to the telescope. But I never actually took any pictures through the telescope like that. I just saw
Okay.
it with my eyes in the telescope, but I never took any pictures of it like that.
And like on Saturn, what kind of cars were they driving and
Yeah,
stuff?
yeah. Nah, they weren't really. I think they were still in the Stone Age, probably on Saturn.
Oh yeah, Fred
Yeah,
Flintstone and
yeah,
Barney.
yeah.
Okay. All right.
But yeah, so basically over the past, because I brought this topic up two weeks ago, I think, and then we said we'll do the personalities episode, and then we'll do the aliens episode. So I've been researching on and off, and I have this Google Doc that's 9 pages long almost. Of I have like one, two, three, four, five, six different alien things. They're not necessarily chronological order, like this happened first, this happened next. It's just some of the stuff that I find the most interesting. And since you are not well versed on the topic, I'm sure there'll be a lot of questions and whatnot. So I picked some of the most interesting things to me, and we can go over those. And then I'm sure that would fill up an ample amount of time.
Of course. And I think my main focus with the episode is I think if we're going to communicate aliens that we should speak in alien. So we'll start with that. I'll go
Oh yeah, yeah, yeah. There you go. I think that would turn out to be a really good episode of people
You
going, "All
do.
right, what the hell's going on?"
Probably get turned off about 10 seconds ago.
Yeah. Yeah.
Okay. So what's a good starting point? Where do you want to start us off?
Okay, so I think the Foo Fighters. Have you ever heard of Foo Fighters? I know there's a group
Just the
like
music
a yeah,
group.
yeah.
Yeah.
There's a music group called the Foo Fighters, but the Foo Fighters are basically. I have a little thing I'll read about it, and then I'll go a little bit further into detail after if I still need to. So,
Sure.
Royal Air Force reported seeing these lights following them during flight as early as March 1942. Similar sightings were seen by the RAF, Russian Air Force, bomber crews when flying over the Balkans. The bulk of sightings of these, which would later be dubbed Foo Fighters, in the last week of November 1944, when pilots were flying over Western Europe at night. They reported seeing fast moving, round glowing objects following their aircraft. These objects were described as fiery and glowing red, white, or orange. Some pilots described them as resembling Christmas tree lights and reported that they seemed to toy with the aircraft, making wild turns before simply vanishing. So, like, they would be coming at their aircraft, and then last second, they would turn out of the way to not cause a collision. All reports described these objects as seemingly being under some sort of intelligent control, but never brought any suspicion of hostility. These strange objects, however, could not be outmaneuvered or shot down by the pilots of the Air Force. This phenomenon was so widespread throughout all of Europe that these fiery objects earned a name. In European theater of operations, they were called Kraut fireballs, but for the most part, they were called Foo Fighters. The military thought these were some sort of advanced German wonder weapon. However, with further investigation, found out that German and Japanese pilots had been reporting similar incidents. Okay, so this was basically during the time of World War II, and a lot of people believe that aliens started showing up after the 2 nuclear weapons got dropped in Nagasaki and Hiroshima. And I'm not sure that it's necessarily... basically, all of this is just hearsay, pretty much. But there's a lot of reports spiked in around, like, nuclear facilities around after those bombs went off, saying that these quote-unquote Foo Fighters would show up around the bases and basically toy with the electronics around those bases and basically would shut off, like, the ability to launch nuclear weapons. So from that, I guess a theory comes about that they're not benevolent, but they just don't want to see us shoot more nuclear weapons and kind of destroy the human race. Like, they want to see us evolve in some certain way. If that makes sense. Like, they just want to see us keep advancing and advancing. But do you have any questions before I keep going? Do you have any major questions that would...
So do you know, like, the term Foo Fighters, does it have a special meaning or anything like that? Or how did they come up with that, I guess?
I kind of looked into it, and it was just kind of... It seemed like foo was kind of a word for, like, phony or fake or something. So it seemed like, since these fiery objects were so fast and kept, like, messing with them, basically, they were just, like, phony... Fighters is just a word for, like, jets or aircraft or something. So it's just, like, basically a non-fighter phony kind of thing. It was just, I don't know. That's about as far as I got with that.
Okay. No, so I think what I'll do is I think I will have a bunch of questions, but you may cover some of them. So what I will do is try to save them for the end. And if you don't cover them, we'll go over them then. This is like the first instance of ever seeing any time of alien life. Is that correct?
Not necessarily. This is some even go back to, like, the 1700s of, like, sightings and stuff like that. But I don't know. This is kind of where it started getting interesting to me and where I kind of gained ground on it, I guess. I don't know. But yeah, sightings as early as, like, 1700, but a lot of people believed that they became more and more frequent directly after the nuclear bombs dropped. So I guess if that gives you kind of an idea.
Okay.
So basically the idea that them coming after the nuclear bombs and them not wanting us to destroy ourselves leads to a couple other theories that I find interesting. So that leads to the question of, okay, why don't they want us to destroy ourselves? So there's some theories that the aliens either created us and... okay, this is a lot of off-the-wall stuff. And I'm just saying I don't necessarily believe in all these theories, but they're just theories that I would like to get out there. So
Okay.
one of the theories is, like, the aliens created us, and it even goes as far as basically we're a farm of bodies, and when we give birth to offspring, that creates new souls, and those souls the aliens harvest out of like abducting us or whatnot. And just the idea is that they created us so they want us to not destroy ourselves, and they're doing anything in their power to prevent that. Another theory is they are us from the future, and they are coming back to, like, this is not necessarily us from the future, but this is a civilization that we used to be much more advanced and we became interplanetary, and this is our species coming back from, like, this is our species coming back to help us not destroy the rest of our species that was here before them, if that makes sense. Does that make sense at all?
So it kind of like essentially what I'm hearing is our future selves coming back to help. This is also very interesting in the the religion realms and
Yeah.
everything like that. So the heaven and all this stuff. So
Yeah, basically, so there's ideas called Younger Dryas Impact Theory, which is basically like 12,000 years ago, there was like a cataclysmic event that wiped out 90 whatever percent of every living thing on Earth. And then from there, we rebuilt and have gained through evolution or whatever, we've gained everything back and we're back up to this point. But before that, 12,000 years ago, we were a much more advanced society and had even become interplanetary. And basically, this is us from 12,000 years ago. That same group of people went to a different planet elsewhere. Like, we figured out wormholes or something like that. So we were able to get light years away and whatnot like that. But that is that species coming back to prevent the rest of us from destroying ourselves. Like, they're still observing us, if that makes sense.
okay,
Um, another theory is they're just some alien species, like they're little green guys from the Zeta Reticuli, millions of light years away, and they just find us fascinating. So they're observing us and they don't want us to destroy ourselves because we're just interesting. Like, kind of how we observe animals, like we observe monkeys, we observe rats, and we wouldn't just give them nuclear weapons to destroy themselves, if that makes sense. Just
right.
kind of observing and stopping that.
So the interesting concept with that is the way that we observe animals and stuff. Animals are aware of our being.
Yeah.
So you're going to go into any detail based on why they're hiding from us or why they seem so skeptical of allowing us to see them?
Okay. So there's a theory that aliens are interdimensional, and it's not necessarily that they are hiding from us, but just that we don't have the capabilities of seeing them yet. Like, there could be alien spaceships right before our eyes, but since we aren't, maybe it's the sense that we live in societies and we lost, kind of like what I was talking about earlier, like we lost our ability to see in the fourth dimension or the fifth dimension or whatever. It's just something that we've lost over time because if you don't use it, you lose it. So maybe we've lost that ability and they're actually there right before our eyes, but we just don't have the capabilities of seeing them anymore. Or maybe it's that they're so advanced that they figured out the capability in what they need to get to that nth dimension, basically. If that makes
Okay,
sense.
because we have previously seen them or
Right.
spotted them.
Right. That was just another theory. Yeah, I
Okay,
guess I don't know exactly why they would be hiding, but there's some other stuff later that I will kind of get into that maybe they're not hiding, but yeah, I guess I won't go into anything that would describe why they would be hiding from us. I see what you're saying,
okay,
though. But yeah, I guess I don't really have anything there.
okay.
Do you have any other questions before I? That was kind of all I had for the Foo Fighters. That was just kind of like a introductory topic thing.
No,
Okay. So this next one is Roswell, New Mexico. Have you ever heard anything about Roswell?
No.
Okay. So I'll basically go over this and then I'll give background knowledge. Okay. So one morning around Independence Day, 1947, about 75 miles from the town of Roswell, New Mexico, a rancher named Mac Brazel found something unusual in his sheep pasture. A mess of metallic sticks held together with tape, chunks of plastic and foil reflectors, and scraps of heavy, glossy, paper-like material. Unable to identify the strange objects, Brazel called Roswell's sheriff. The sheriff, in turn, called officials at the nearby Roswell Army Air Force Base. Soldiers fanned out across Brazel's field, gathering the mysterious debris and whisking it away in armored trucks. On July 8th, RAAF captures flying saucer on ranch in Roswell region was the top story in the Roswell Daily Record, the newspaper in Roswell at the time. But was it true? On July 9th, an Air Force official clarified the paper's report. The alleged flying saucer, he said, was only a crashed weather balloon. However, to anyone who had seen the debris or the newspaper photographs of it, it was clear that whatever this thing was, it was no weather balloon. Some people believed, and still believe, that the crashed vehicle had not come from Earth at all. They argued that the debris in Brazel's field came from an alien spaceship. Around the same week as Roswell, there was a second crash site about 250 miles away in the plains of St. Augustine. There was a group of archaeologists that found the site. While they were there, the government arrived and basically told them to say nothing about what they saw because it was so close to World War II. Because it was so close to World War II, the story died down until many years later, where witnesses would then come out and speak about it. So basically, there was two crash sites, one a little outside of Roswell, New Mexico, and then one in the San Augustine area. Plain, I believe it is. But so one of them, the newspaper had photographs and basically this big article saying RAAF captures flying saucer on ranch in Roswell region. And it had photographs, and there was a big article about it. And you can even go back, and people still have the newspaper, and you can check it and verify it, that was an actual legitimate newspaper article that got published. And basically, the government came in and said, "Oh, no, that's just a weather balloon," and took all the remnants of this crash site and basically hauled it away in armored trucks. And then, about 250 miles away, archaeologists found a similar site, and the government basically showed up, did the same thing, hauled it away, and told everybody there to basically say nothing about it because the description that they gave to the people to say nothing about it was it's around the times of World War II, and if they said something about it, then maybe if it was some other countries' advanced technology that they would know that they had received it or something like that, but I'm not sure about the exact specifics of that.
Okay. What is the RAFF? What does that stand for? What is that?
RAAF. It's some Air Force. I can Google it real quick.
Oh, okay. No, I didn't know if you were just abbreviating something or if it was.
Oh, okay.
It's some government agency
Yeah,
though that's looking over aviation. Okay.
Yeah. It's some Air Force of some sort. It's just an abbreviation for that.
Got it. Okay.
Do you have any questions this far?
No.
Okay. So this site in specific, the Roswell, New Mexico, it was a lot of theories come from this one, like people call them donation sites or things like that, where basically the theory is that these were maybe drones or maybe alien donation sites, basically. So the aliens crashed on purpose to maybe give us a little bit of technology and maybe get our science, like we would collect their technology and we would use it and we would eventually reverse engineer it and we would be able to engineer technology similar to that on our own, if that makes sense.
Yeah, so they were using it for giving us essentially information for advancement.
Yeah, exactly.
Okay.
That was a leading theory. Let me see. So there's this other theory that the cause of these two donation sites, if you will, being 250 miles away was that maybe if they weren't donations, then aliens would have been driving or drones or whatever. These flying objects would have been flying from opposite directions, and maybe they crashed into each other and caused a cue ball esque collision. And then they both ended up crashing, but since they were going so extremely fast that they would end up 250 miles away from each other, that's kind of another explanation of it. The government also was using uh, air balloons to get info on Russian nuclear testing. So that's kind of why they said, oh, no, this was just another one of our hot air balloons. So don't worry about it. It's nothing. And then they hauled it away and kind of tried to hush hush about it.
I mean, how fast would those two objects have to have been going in order to hit into each other and then reflect 250 miles apart?
So thinking about it is if a couple, okay, so alien civilization, you look at it and basically the nearest planet that these things could be living on, assuming that they are under the same stipulations for life that we are, like Earth is in the Goldilocks zone, meaning it's a certain distance from the sun. It has a moon that a certain distance from the sun that allows us to have liquid water and but it's not too hot. It also has a moon that catches reflections of asteroids and meteors and whatnot. Basically, that's the Goldilocks zone. You look at other planets in the Goldilocks zone of their stars, and they are light years upon light years away. So the thinking is there's a couple ways to get to Earth from one of those other Goldilocks planets. It's to either go faster than the speed of light by some means, or to go through wormholes, which are basically the idea of basically there's a fabric of it's like a fracture in space that takes you from one area to another area millions of or hundreds of thousands of millions of light years away in the blink of an eye because time and space is rippled in. I guess I don't know how to explain wormholes any better, but
Okay.
it's basically just this space in this area in space where if you go in one side and you come out the other side, you're in a complete different area in could be a complete different galaxy, could be just a very far space away. So basically those are two ideas.
Okay, well, when I've seen wormholes, I think that I've seen them almost to the effect of it looks like a little like lake that's inverted. So you
Yeah,
step
yeah,
into
yeah.
the lake, like let's say you step into the lake in New York, and then you come right out on the other side of the lake in California. Is that
Yeah, yeah,
kind
yeah.
of what your perspective of what a wormhole would look like to the naked eye?
Yeah, it's kind of I guess my way of looking at it is like kind of like an hourglass, but like half of an hourglass, like one of those circular halves of an hourglass, and just you go through the smallest part of it, and then you come out in a complete different area, if that makes sense.
Okay.
So the idea of if they are traveling faster than the speed of light, then it would make sense as to why they were 250 miles away. Because, I mean, if you're traveling at the speed of light, it's not hard to end up 250 miles away, no matter how fast you crash to the ground.
Right. But my question with that is if they're going that fast, wouldn't everything just disintegrate and wouldn't it be like essentially a dust?
That's a good point. Yeah. Like I said, I'm not a professional alien uh, researcher, I guess. I'm just
Analyst?
yeah,
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 no, no,
yeah.
no.
Professional
No,
analyst.
yeah, yeah.
So I don't have the
Yeah.
answers to all these questions, but
No, of course, yeah.
it's just stuff that's interesting to me. Another thing is Roswell has a nuclear. Roswell is the only, or I guess was the only military base in the entire United States that had a nuclear launch facility. So a lot of people theorize that maybe that's another reason as to why it's around this area. Like, because there's one nuclear launch facility in the entire United States. So you would think that basically the density of all of these alien craft is going to be in this one location, basically. If that even is the idea of they're trying to monitor and observe basically nuclear facilities, if that makes sense.
And then where is Area 51? It's in
Area,
Nevada, right?
yep, Area 51's in Nevada. We'll get into
Okay.
that. We'll get into that one a
Okay.
little bit later.
Got it. Okay.
That one's probably my favorite one we'll be talking about today, but
Okay.
yeah. So do you have any more questions about that one?
Nope.
Okay. So we've got the Tic Tac video, and then after that, I've got probably one of my favorites. The Joe Rogan episode that I watched that got me into all of this. So,
Okay.
so
Let's hear it.
okay. The Tic Tac video. In 2004, Commander David Fravor witnessed what came to be known as the Tic Tac UFO incident on a training run over the Pacific Ocean, 140 miles southwest of San Diego. So David Fravor is a Navy Air Force pilot. He flies like F-1 jets and fighter jets and stuff of that caliber. At the time, he was stationed aboard the USS Nimitz as the commanding officer of Strike Fighter Squadron 41, also known as the Black Aces. The incident broke into the mainstream media after the New York Times republished a story reported by fellow UFO festival presenter and investigative journalist George Knapp. George Knapp is a large part in the next story that I'll be talking about. David Fravor enlisted in a little bit of background about David Fravor. David Fravor enlisted in the Marine Corps at age 17. 2 years later, he transferred to the Naval Academy. As a young midshipman, Fravor did his first training aboard the USS Nimitz and dreamed of someday flying for the Navy. Little did he know that 20 years later, he would be in command of that same squadron he saw fly all those years earlier. At 24, a 24-year-old veteran in the U.S. military, Fravor retired from the U.S. Navy in 2006 after 18 years as a Navy jet pilot and 5 deployments in Iraq, beginning with Desert Storm. So this is Commander David Fravor's description of what he witnessed on November 14th, 2004. This is an excerpt from the ABC News interview. I can tell you, quote, I can tell you, I think it was not from this world. I've seen pretty much about everything that I can see in that realm, and this was nothing close. I have never seen anything in my life, in my history of flying, that has the performance, the acceleration. Keep in mind, this thing had no wings. You know, you see a lot of interesting things, but to come up on something that's a 40-foot long, white Tic Tac with no wings that can move really in any random direction that it wants to, and go from hovering over the ocean to mirroring us to accelerating to the point where it just disappears, like poof, then it was gone. On this day, there were 4 pilots that saw this incident. So, yeah, basically that's kind of what happened. There was 2 different Air Force, or there was 2 different aircraft flown by the Navy, and among those 2 aircraft were 4 separate pilots. And there's a YouTube video of footage of this. It's very grainy, and it's in black and white. It's in like infrared, if you know what that is. Or I guess it's not infrared, but it's the black and white version of infrared. Basically, it's heat detection.
Okay.
Even though I don't think it was heat detection, it was some other form of detection, but it was advanced detection, and it's a video. You can find it on YouTube if you look it up. It's basically all four pilots, and it shows their technology of tracking, and they're trying to. There's this little tic tac object, and it's flying super fast to the point where they're trying to track it and lock on with their ability to lock onto stuff so they can shoot missiles or whatever from their jet. But
And when you say a tic tac, you're talking about like the breath mint shaped, like essentially something
yeah,
in the air.
yep,
Okay.
just that tic tac shape in flying it however fast it was flying, and they're just trying to lock on to it. And there's a video of when they finally lock onto it. You can hear them all like get super excited and like high five and whatnot about it, and it's just an interesting video to watch. But basically, the whole idea behind the Tic Tac is it has no wings, it has no uh, means of propulsion that are tangible. Like we can't see the means of propulsion. So for an F1 jet, the means of propulsion would be that there's jet fuel spewing out the back, creating a big flame, making the jet go in one direction super fast. It didn't have any wings. It didn't have any propulsion. It at one point it went under the ocean surface, so it disappeared like that, and it went from I think it was like 14,000 feet to sea level in the matter of seconds or something like that. I don't know
Okay.
exact feet or whatever, but a couple more things to add to the story. Back when this came out, there was a stigma to report on cases like this. So if sightings were seen from Navy pilots like this, it was kind of like it was reported less and less because they didn't want other pilots in the Navy to be like, "Oh, get a load of this guy. He thinks he reported something, so it's just probably a drone from some other place," or just stuff like that. Just the fear of being judged, I guess. So a lot of less people reported on it. You can talk to a lot of Navy pilots and they would say that they saw these activities, but it never reported on it. And looking back on it, they might regret it or stuff like that. But yeah, there was just a stigma to report on stuff like that, just because it was kind of anti patriotic, I guess. I don't know if that's what you would say, but another thing to highlight in this case is that there's a video recording of what they saw. I went over that. Uh, so basically, another thing to underline about this case is David Fravor. He's a commander, and this is basically he's leading this squadron of Air Force, whatever you would call them, and he's the leader of this. So his credentials of seeing basically all forms of military technology and just being deployed in Iraq and the Desert Storm and just other stuff like that. His knowledge and ability to decipher what is human technology, what we have, maybe he wouldn't understand what other government agencies have or stuff like that, but he's got a pretty good BS detector on what's real and what's not, if that makes sense, because he's experienced in that field, so he knows more so than the average Joe, if you will, if that makes sense.
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah. Basically, his main thing was it had no wings and no means of propulsion, no flame, no rotors, no nothing, seemingly magic, and just the sheer speed that this thing moved at. That's basically that whole idea. Any questions on that?
No, but I'm just thinking like out loud. Like,
Yeah, yeah.
do you realize how awesome it would be to have some type of device like this where you're actually able to pull pranks on one of the biggest government agencies
Yeah.
in the world? If this is all actually true, it's actually like oh yeah, like the top dogs of pretty much the world, and we're like pranking them,
Yeah, yeah,
making it to the point where they don't even share the information. It
yeah,
would be like us coming up in a small town like Sturgis, Michigan, and have some type of technology. Like the local police department doesn't have a helicopter, so like let's say we just had a helicopter that was fast as crap, and we would go around town just pranking the crap out of them and everything like
yeah,
that. Like they probably wouldn't want these types of things to go out because they know that they have no way of being able to do anything about it, and it would be
yeah,
very, very embarrassing to them to, to to have these things reported on.
yeah. That's interesting that you bring that up because one of the main things about like just the whole alien believer community in general, I guess, is one of the main ideas is the government has information on these things, but they know for certain it's not ours, and they know that it's not a enemy government or whatever. They know that it's interplanetary, and they don't want to release it to the public because basically that would create this catastrophe of everybody knowing that the government can't do anything about it and just spiraling out of control that way. That's kind of one of the main theories of why the government doesn't say anything about it.
Which is interesting. Going back to the white lies that I was talking about with our personality types, sometimes lies are beneficial in being able to protect people from unknown things,
Yeah.
or the unknowns, the unknown unknowns, like the black swans and those types of things.
Mm-hmm.
Where what benefit is it for people to know that these things are all true and that there's not a dang thing we can do about it?
Yeah,
And what
exactly.
type of anxiety and issues is that going to create? With the structure of a civilized world.
Yeah, exactly. It's just the kind of the idea of if these things do for some reason become malevolent, we would be gone in just the snap of a finger. It's like there's nothing we could do about it. We don't have their technology. We wouldn't be able to like there's nothing we would be able to do about it. So it's just kind of that idea that why would the government tell the public if this was real? Why would the government tell anybody about it? Because it would just basically it would bring society to a complete standstill where no progress is being made. Everybody's freaking out. They're not doing anything productive, and it just spirals society basically.
Right.
Yeah. So another thing that I meant to bring up earlier with you something you said reminded me of that is with the Roswell crash sites, them seeing as donations. A thing that Joe Rogan brings up a lot when he talks about this incident, because Joe Rogan's a super big alien guy and he talks about aliens a lot, even if it's not like even if he doesn't have like a specialist of these topics on or anything. Like he had David Fravor on one time just to talk about the experience and whatnot. But even if he has just like some random other comedian, he talks about this alien stuff a lot. And one of the
Okay.
things that he talks about is assume that Roswell was a donation site. Think of it as like we go back 1,000 years and give, or even before planes were invented, we go back to that time and give those people a plane, and everybody's like, what the heck is this? This is like some other dimensional extraterrestrial technology. Like this is not real. And then it's just kind of like, you know what I mean? Like
Of course, yeah.
it's like giving a
Like
monkey a gun.
Give Adam and Eve a motorcycle.
Yeah, yeah. It's just like some mind-boggling technology that doesn't make any sense to them.
Right.
Yeah. That's
So,
yeah.
something interesting with Joe Rogan though is that I don't know if you know this, but I think he does like a lot of drugs, doesn't he?
Yeah, he does psychedelics sometimes. Yeah, he
Yeah.
smokes a lot of weed and
So
stuff like that.
he likes getting into all these metaphysical
Yeah, yeah,
things
yeah.
and like being in tune with himself, I think he calls it. So
Yeah. Yeah, for sure.
so this episode with the Tic Tac, what area did it happen over?
It was somewhere it was over the ocean in the Pacific, I believe it was. Like
Oh, okay.
off the coast in the Pacific, I think
Off.
I read.
Okay.
Yeah. It was in the ocean somewhere. Well, not in the ocean, but
Uh,
just barely off the coast and in
okay.
over the ocean.
So off the coast of California.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yep. Anything else you want to add before we go on to this one?
Nope.
Okay. So this one, Bob Lazar. Have you ever heard that name?
No.
Okay. Bob Lazar. This was the episode of Joe Rogan where he had Bob Lazar on, and this was like the episode of where I was like, "Whoa, this is super fascinating." So, this one, Bob Lazar's story starts when he was applying to Los Alamos Lab in, I believe it's in Nevada, but I'm not sure. He eventually got the job. Bob Lazar went to MIT and Caltech before this. Oddly enough, none of these institutions admit that Bob ever worked there, even though there is proof via newspapers at Los Alamos Lab supporting that Bob worked there. Caltech and MIT also say that he never went there. Researchers behind this topic have even gotten a hold of phone books at Los Alamos Lab that have the name, in quotes, Robert Lazar in the directory, and it was his phone number at the time. I can't say for certain his level of education because I was not there. I didn't go to the university. There's no records per se of him being there, but yeah, just his explanation of it is who's going to hire somebody at Los Alamos Lab, which is basically, I'll get into it later, but his idea is who's going to hire somebody at Los Alamos Lab with no educational experience. Anyways, in his free time, Bob liked to experiment. So much so that he had a particle accelerator in his bedroom and his car had a jet engine on it. The latter was the reason that there was a newspaper story about him while at Los Alamos. The newspaper also describes how Bob Lazar was employed as a physicist at the time of publishing this article. It's as if someone or some organization is trying to hide the fact that Bob has ever worked at any of these places. Witness statements were collected saying that they vividly remember him going to school at Caltech and remember even dropping him off there occasionally and picking him back up from school. This newspaper story drew the eyes of Area S4. It's similar to Area 51, but they group it together because it's similar to Area 51, but Area S4 is like a similar thing located in the same general vicinity. He claimed, so basically when he started at Area S4, it started with basically them sitting him down and giving him a bunch of briefings to go over. He claimed 121 briefings in which they sat him down in a room and he had read these documents. These documents had a bunch of information regarding alien bodies, where these aliens come from, ship schematics, etc. While reading this, Lazar was thinking to himself that this must be a memory test to see what he could remember from reading this and take a test later, because it seemed like such just mumbo jumbo they were feeding him. He's like, oh, this must be just, I read it, they test me on it later to see what I can remember. That wasn't the case. There was never a test, just thrown straight to work. None of the information can be validated by Bob other than what he actually individually worked on. While working at S4, Bob and his partner Barry were given this antimatter reactor. He claims this reactor created its own gravitational field. They could turn it on and off, and they could turn on and off the gravitational field. But while it was on, he claims you couldn't even touch the reactor, similar to how batteries react to each other when you try to touch them together. Their job at S4 was to figure out exactly how this reactor worked and how to replicate it. If they would be able to do this and replicate it, you could then implement this technology into something that we could produce. Basically try to reverse engineer, understand the intricacies of it and how it works, and then be able to build one with the materials given, basically. That was their main mission. While he was at S4, he claims to have seen 9 different alien crafts. He claims that they are of all different shapes and sizes. Lazar claims to have seen these one day. One of the hangar doors was open, and the hangar housed all of these different crafts. He also says that one day he was walking through an area where he was told to keep eyes forward, hands at side. During this walk, he saw from a half a second glance, two men in lab coats looking down at this small figure in a seat. He doesn't believe it was an alien, more so just a doll that was used for measurements, if anything, but worth noting for sure. Multiple things that Bob had mentioned in the late 80s, early 90s were seen as impossible or science fiction, that he was just making it up. However, later on these things would be proven by science. Some of these things would include the element 115, some hand scanner that would scan your bones and identify you as almost a fingerprint, and some ideas behind gravity. I don't remember exactly what, but I remember something about gravity. I think it was kind of supporting the idea of Einstein that gravity was a wave instead of a force, but something similar to that. He also explains how these crafts look and operate, of which I'm not quite qualified to describe or even try to describe. But basically, these objects would have their own source of gravity. He sometimes calls it anti-gravity and can shoot a beam of gravity and use that as a form of propulsion. Basically, they turn on this antimatter reactor. It forms gravity around itself and the ship, and then would be able to shoot a beam of gravity or anti-gravity in one area and basically use that as propulsion that way. Element 115 was quote unquote discovered in 2003. Now keep in mind Bob Lazar was working at Area S4 in the late 80s, early 90s. I think he started working in Los Alamos in the late 80s, but S4 was in the early 90s. So element 115 was actually discovered in 2003, but nobody's been able to get a stable version of it. Basically what that means is elements all have isotopes, which in layman's terms, it's the same amount of protons, but a different number of neutrons for an element. So element 115 has very few stable isotopes to which scientists still haven't been able to reproduce. They basically haven't been able to get a stable version of 115 that has been able to stay stable for more than a millionth of a second or whatever. Lazar claims that the stable version of 115 gives the ability to manipulate gravity, hence being the magnum opus of this whole thing. And throughout, there's a documentary on, I'm not sure what it's on actually, but I saw it on YouTube, I think, that basically he did not want to talk about this element 115 at all because basically he thought it was the magnum opus of the whole thing. Like it was the main focus of this entire project for them. So he didn't want to talk about it at all in fear of basically they would come for his life. Bob's time at S4 was brought to an end due to an affair that his wife was having while he was working there, actually. The reasoning behind that is that he had such high clearance and everything was monitored on his side, like his cell phone, his everything personal was being monitored. And security at S4 waited to see how Bob would react to the news of his wife's affair. So in this time, they stopped giving him access to the project. They wouldn't let him back to work, basically. They just told him, hey, you need to take a break, come back. Well, we'll let you know when you can come back. And because of this, he thought he was being kicked out of the program. So he took a group of his friends out on a Wednesday night to view one of their scheduled test flights of these alleged alien crafts. He was eventually caught and kicked out of S4 entirely. And since this, they've tried to ruin his reputation, have raided his home, and have even threatened his life. Okay, so thoughts?
So,
do you have any questions?
When it comes to like unstable elements, do you know how many like unstable elements there are that aren't on the periodic charts?
I have no idea.
Okay. I guess I didn't really realize that was even really a thing. I thought it was either an element or it was like nothing, but somehow they're able to categorize these things that are something that they can't figure out. Is that what I'm
I
hearing?
think basically the idea is element 115 is this wasn't even so there's elements on the periodic table and element 115 wasn't even like a thought. It wasn't even perceived to be real. But Bob Lazar said, "Hey, this element 115, it's real. We have a stable version of it back in the 90s, I believe it was." And then later in 2003 or 2006 or something, science discovered that, hey, this is like a real legitimate thing. And it just so happened that he said it was real back in 2003. But basically, the idea of isotopes is okay, so you take hydrogen. I don't know exactly what forms of hydrogen are stable and what forms of hydrogen are unstable. But basically, so say hydrogen isotope with 3 neutrons is the one that's stable. And you could use that and use it in chemical equations and whatnot. But take hydrogen with the isotope of 7 neutrons and say that one is not stable. It just disintegrates, it evaporates, it whatever. It explodes. I don't know. I'm not a scientist. But basically that's the idea. Does that kind of make sense or
I mean, I guess I'm not super great at science, so trying to comprehend it is a little bit difficult.
okay.
But essentially, an element is made up of compounds with your neutrons, electrons, and protons, right?
Mhm. Yeah.
Okay. And then it's based on what compounds. So, are there people that just go around messing with all these different elements uh,
Oh yeah,
and
I'm sure.
adding things to them?
Yeah, I'm sure chemists they just have chemists all the time working on what bonds with what. Because I know in
Okay.
chemistry it needs a certain type of electrons to bind to different compounds and form compounds like that. I'm really not honestly too sure, but basically the protons, how many protons something has, that's what makes it the element. Like I think hydrogen has 1 proton, helium has 2 protons, or something like that. I don't know, but
Yeah, I guess our family never got into making meth or anything
yeah,
cool
yeah,
like that,
yeah,
so I'm not very well
yeah,
versed.
yeah, yeah. But do you have any other questions about kind of like this story in general?
Not yet.
Okay. Well, that was okay. So basically, that was kind of the end of. I just gave you like a brief overview of from start to finish, but I have a couple extra things I wanted to add on. So there's a documentary called Bob Lazar, Area 51 and Flying Saucers. It's by Jeremy Corbell or something like that. It basically goes over this whole story. I watched it's like an hour and something. I watched it just in I was sitting here watching it with my keyboard in hand, typing out stuff to write down for this as I was going. But that was kind of one of the main sources of this story. It goes over it very well, and there's a lot of stuff that I didn't go over in this, but it's still super interesting. And yeah, this documentary, Bob talks about the director, or talks about how the director and Lazar recorded a conversation in the woods with no phone or no technology. So the next day, after this private conversation, his house was raided by the FBI, and the FBI agents referenced this conversation directly. It makes you think if everything he's saying can be disproven like they claim, then why is there still so many eyes on him behind the scenes? So basically, the FBI or the CIA or whatever 3 letter organization that kicked him out of Area S4 and kicked him off of these projects in general, basically, they're doing anything and everything to disprove what he's saying. And what I was just going over is there's this part of the documentary that shows they have no phones, nothing that can be tracked. This one camera has a SD card, and that is the only thing that should be able to uh, have this information of this conversation. It was the only record of it, and then he talks about how he took the information from that and encrypted it in some way. I don't know exactly, but the idea was that this conversation should have never been able to have been recorded by any outside source. So, like, if you're talking around your phone, the government could tap into your phone essentially and hear what you're saying. I think that's a pretty common idea and well understood that they have the ability to do that. But since they didn't have any phones or other technology or whatever, this camera wasn't connected to the internet in any way. It was just this one SD card, and that information was after that encrypted. And then the day after they recorded that secretive conversation about he didn't even release what it said on it, that the FBI raided his apartment and directly referenced this conversation. Does that make sense?
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Okay. Do you have any questions? That's kind of all I had for that. I can go deeper into if you have questions on stuff, I can go deeper into it, but I don't. That was kind of the brief overview of that story.
No, I don't.
Okay. So yeah, I'll kind of give a little bit deeper. So I don't know. I guess why I'm interested in this is because it's the whole idea was that he's in this super secretive organization and then he's a whistleblower basically. And then because I guess he was a whistleblower after being kicked out of this secretive organization where he was working on alleged alien craft and whatnot. And just the idea that he was kicked off because his wife was having an affair, because basically he couldn't tell her what he was doing because the government was monitoring his phone at the time, and they saw if he was texting his wife like, hey, I'm working on an alien craft and this is crazy stuff and I'll tell you all about it. If they read that, then they would immediate red flag for the government. They're kicking him off the project basically. So she didn't know what he was doing, trust issues, whatever. Then she had an affair, and basically they said, all right, let's see how this plays out. If he starts freaking out and basically spirals out of control, then he can't do anything to the project because he's not working on it currently. And then after that, basically they had these test flights every Wednesday, I want to say it was, and to where they would take these alien craft that he saw in the hangar and basically they would pilot them. They would hover, they would do loops and whatnot. They would go from super high altitude to just hovering above the ground. They would do test flights basically. And he took a group of his friends. The story is that he tells he took a group of his friends out to an observation point just outside of Area S4, and he recorded it. Of course, the George Knapp, the guy, he's kind of like a big alien guy, in just he's kind of an alien expert and just getting the story out there. He has it somewhere, but it hasn't been released, not that I know of at least. And basically, he got caught with his friends recording the test flights at Area S4. So after that, they basically said, all right, yeah, you're done. You're no longer working here. You're fired, whatever. And then they've raided his house multiple times. They've tried to scrub his name from Los Alamos lab, which was the first place that he worked. They tried to erase his name from Caltech and MIT. Just stuff like that, which I guess maybe that's why I'm so interested in all this stuff, just because, I don't know, if this story is true, it's like, I don't know, it's just very interesting to me. Are you interested in this at all as I am, or is it just kind of like
It's just
mumbo jumbo?
I have so many questions, more so of like, for example, I guess I'm more surprised that the guy is like still
alive. Yeah.
Yeah, it's like based on so many of the conspiracy theories that I hear about things, it's like the government is trying to scrub this or trying to do that, which in most conspiracy they just get rid of the person, and it just seems like
Right.
that makes it so much easier. However, on the flip side, I can see where if you come up with this type of information or you create this type of a story, it's just like the notoriety and the fame that you can get from doing something like this
Yeah.
is quite substantial. So
Yeah.
it's like me and you, if we could create all these aliases and say that we went to such and such school or did such and such, and then we start creating these things and people start catching on to it and they start, and we have some things that we can like match up to it to make it believable.
Mm-hmm.
Like how, it's like sometimes stories are fun, like stories of Loch Ness monster and Bigfoot. Sometimes it's fun to create those stories just so that you have the stories and people are, you're getting fame from those stories. It's interesting with the personalities. One of the things that parrots are really good at is essentially exaggerating their stories a little bit because it makes the story
More
much
interesting.
more entertaining,
Yeah,
right?
yeah.
And so that's why for me it's like I it's like how do you I just have so many thoughts about like what does this information do for us as human beings? How do we use it? What's the purpose of it? And trying to, I guess, understand this, it fascinates me. It's just, yeah, it's just so like,
Yeah.
I don't know. It's, when there's one of those new things that you're just hearing all this stuff about, and you're sometimes it just takes a little while to digest it and be like,
Mm-hmm.
wow, okay. And so that's where I'm just kind of like, huh. And
Yeah.
I'm thinking about all these questions that I have is why is this good? Why is this like this?
Mm-hmm. I guess to your point of kind of making the story up, like one of us could just make a story up. And I guess one of the things that I found most interesting is the whatever agency, or I guess if an agency did tell Los Alamos Lab, hey, basically scrub his name from ever saying that he worked here. The thing about that is there's a newspaper from whatever time that was that it was in the documentary. There's a picture of the newspaper and he has it right there, and it's an article about he had a jet powered, I think it was a Honda. Basically, he hooked his Honda up with a jet engine and it was on the back of it. And basically, there was a newspaper article written about it. And in that article, it said that he was a physicist at Los Alamos Labs at the time. And then going back after this story releases, that Los Alamos Lab basically says, oh, no, he never worked here, or stuff like that. I guess that's just
Yeah, especially
where
when
I'm
there's
interested. Yeah, yeah.
conflicting evidence and conflicting stories. It's
Mm-hmm.
just it makes it more of a conspiracy, and it just kind of adds more fire or fuel to the fire, right?
Mm-hmm.
So
Yeah.
this is something that was interesting back in high school. I don't know if you ever had any like fairy tale stories or anything like that, but there was this place in Colon where essentially, oh man, I don't remember what the name of it was now. I can't believe it skipped. There was this famous name for it where people would go there, and it was where Al Capone used to live. Like it was one of his old houses, and people would say that it was like haunted, or there was always people there, like
Mm-hmm.
doing stuff. And so, what was cool in high school, me and some of my friends, we would go to different places and we would essentially create these stories of
Yeah.
things that would happen and then go share them. And then, like, other people would
Yeah.
go to these places and be scared, and
Yeah.
then you'd come up with more in-depth stories about, oh, they chased me out of there too. And
Yeah,
then it's
yeah.
just like, so all these stories keep getting created and created, and it's exciting because like they get passed along when they're just fables and none of it was ever true, but it brings a lot of excitement.
Yeah, that's another thing that I wanted to talk about. Like just the putting putting the thought out in the air, and like the first person that put the thought out of, hey, aliens are real, this happened, that happened. Nobody had ever thought about that before. And then all of a sudden you have a flood of, oh my gosh, I saw this too. Like for example, yeah, if you if you went to one of those sites, just made up a complete lie about some place, and then other people heard it and they're like, oh, I'm gonna go check that out. And then they saw what they thought was like a person in there, but it was actually just like, I don't know, a rat or something, and they're like, "Dude, I saw it. It's real," and then it just keeps spreading like that. It's just
Yes,
like,
because your minds, if they're so accustomed to hearing what it is and they see even the smallest, slightest things, they
mm-hmm,
create that reality of that's what it was. I saw it too.
mm-hmm,
So interesting. This vacation, me and Isaac were out at Tiger Woods' Pop Stroke, a putt putt place,
mm-hmm.
and we were. I was talking to a guy that was kind of going around, and he played like a whole bunch of holes, just like us. And I was like, "Yeah, you're having a good day today." And he was like, "Where are you guys? What are you guys doing?" I was like, "Oh, we're just on vacation doing this." I was like, "What are you doing here?" He's like, "Well, Thursday they got a contest, and I'm putting for $10,000." I was like, "What?" He's like, "Yeah, they had this contest where you do all this putting, and I was one of the 7 contestants. So this Thursday, I'm gonna be putting for $10,000." And Isaac looks at me afterwards. He's like, "Dude, when someone asks us stuff like this, like
Yeah.
we got to come up with something that's not just an ordinary answer." He's just like, that guy could have just totally blew smoke and created that,
Yeah.
but it was an awesome story. And I remember like when
Yeah.
I was out in Arizona for like a business trip, the Uber driver asked what we were there for, and one of the guys I was with, he started to go on this long story about how we owned this ATV company, and we were out in the desert sleeping in tents, and we were working on our ATVs and doing testing on them and stuff like that. And
Yeah.
it was fun just to keep adding more and more information
Yeah.
to the story to create essentially fairy tales, right? Like
Yeah.
it's a lot of fun to create fairy tales, especially when people get intrigued and they start asking more and more questions. Like,
Yeah. Because that Uber driver went home to his family and he's like, "You're never going to believe who I Ubered for today." And
yeah,
then he's read that story and it's not even real. And it's just, yeah.
right. I mean, could you imagine like you guys getting an Uber? We're down here in South Florida and be like, "Yeah, what do you guys?" We're like, "Well, so there's actually this place out in Everglades where there's known aliens. There's an alien commune out there that they're like trying to hide,
Yeah.
and so we're actually going to go out there and discover it. They actually live with the pythons, and when they do the python roundup, that's when sometimes they're able to actually see them out
Yeah.
there. So we're going out there to be able to hopefully communicate with them." Uh,
Yeah. Just
like,
making just blatant lies up.
dude, it's so much fun.
Yeah, I'm sure. I'm sure. Yeah. Just the idea, kind of the whole alien idea is just the idea of mass hysteria, right? Like one person says, "Oh, I saw this," and then another person sees something not even similar, but they have the predisposition of this guy saw an alien. So anything similar, even remotely to an alien, I'm going to say, "Hey, I saw that alien too." And then more and more people keep seeing it. And because you have the idea of if you look up in the sky and you see anything out of the ordinary, it's, "Oh my God, I just saw an alien. I just saw a UFO," or something like that. And it's just the idea of mass hysteria keeps spreading these stories over and over. And yeah, just keeps piling up that way.
I mean, could you imagine each and every day when you came home and Evelyn asked you how your days was, if you just created this elongated story
Yeah.
about something spontaneous that happened, like you guys were nailing down a floor and you shot a nail through and it went in the guy's head, and
Yeah.
and then the next day, like each and every day, she's gonna like look forward to like hearing those stories and seeing how entertaining they are, whether they're true or not. It's just this idea of make believe. It's like why we're so intrigued with movies and in fantasy,
Yeah,
right?
yeah,
I mean,
yeah.
it's amazing for a mind to actually hear something and then comprehend it and then to think even deeper and deeper and deeper.
Yep. Meanwhile, at work every day, I'm no longer working. I'm just writing these fictional stories of what could happen, and just to tell her when I get home.
Well, no, you just wait on, like, you just create the stories like on the 45-minute drive home or whatever,
Oh
like
yeah, yeah,
about what could have happened.
yeah.
I mean, that's one thing I've always loved to do is create stories. So I think it's something that just comes pretty easy to me.
Hmm. Yeah, I'm not as good at stuff like that.
No,
No, not really. I'm more of a I'm more of a research
truther.
based guy. Yeah.
Yeah, you like
Yeah.
the meat and potatoes of
Yeah,
reality.
yeah, yeah.
Well, I just
as
like
you can
going around
see.
like making up these outlandish stories
Yeah.
so that people go so far off that like dude, this is what's interesting. Like this week when I was like sharing a story that I cut my own hair, like Brittany and Ashley, they didn't know like whether to believe me or not because
Yeah.
they're like
Yeah.
we don't even know like what comes out of your mouth is true
Yeah.
and what's not true. And I was like, man, that's like not necessarily a good thing.
Yeah.
Like I don't
Yeah.
that's not something I really want to be known for, but I guess it's
Yeah.
just like
That's where we're at.
yeah. I feel like I'm the little boy that cried wolf
Mm-hmm.
too many times.
Yeah.
So
Alrighty. I got one last story, if you will, and then after that we can start to wrap it up.
all right.
So, September 19th and 20th, 1961, in rural New Hampshire, Betty and Barney Hill claimed they were abducted by aliens. According to a variety of reports given by the Hills, the alleged UFO sighting happened at about 10:30 p.m. September 19th, 1961. The Hills were driving back to Portsmouth from a vacation in Niagara Falls and Montreal. Just south of Lancaster, New Hampshire, Betty claimed to have observed a bright point of light in the sky that moved from below the moon and the planet Jupiter, upward to the west of the moon. While Barney navigated U.S. Route 3, Betty reasoned that she was observing a falling star, only it moved upward. Because it moved erratically and grew bigger and brighter, Betty urged Barney to stop the car for a closer look, as well as to walk their dog, Delcy. Barney stopped at a scenic picnic area just south of Twin Mountain. Betty, looking through binoculars, observed an odd-shaped craft flashing multicolored lights traveling across the face of the moon. Because her sister had several years earlier said she had seen a flying saucer, Betty thought it might be what she was observing. Kind of that idea of mass hysteria again, of this is what I think I saw, so therefore she has that idea in her head already. Through binoculars, Barney observed what he reasoned was a commercial airliner traveling toward Vermont on its way to Montreal. However, he soon changed his mind, because without looking as if it had turned, the craft rapidly descended in his direction. This observation caused Barney to realize this object that was a plane. The object that was a plane was not a plane. The Hills said they continued driving on the quiet and isolated road, moving very slowly through Franconia Notch in order to observe the object as it came even closer. At one point, the object passed above a restaurant and signal tower on top of Cannon Mountain and came out near the old man of the mountain. These are all specific places that mean basically nothing to us, but if somebody were to dive deeper into this, it would just give them somewhere to base the positions off of. Betty testified that it was at least 1.5 times the length of the granite cliff profile, which was 40 feet long, and that it seemed to be rotating. The couple watched as the silent, illuminated craft moved erratically and bounced back and forth in the night sky. About 1 mile south of Indian Head, they said the object rapidly descended toward their vehicle, causing Barney to stop in the middle of the highway. The huge, silent craft hovered about 80 to 100 feet above the Hills' 1957 Chevrolet Bel Air and filled the entire field of view in the windshield. It reminded Barney of a huge pancake. Carrying his pistol in his pocket, he stepped away from the vehicle and moved closer to the object. Using the binoculars, Barney claimed to have seen 8 to 11 humanoid figures who were peering out the craft's window, seeming to look at him. In unison, all but one figure moved to what appeared to be a panel on the rear wall of the hallway that encircled the front portion of the craft. The one remaining figure continued to look at Barney and communicated a message telling him to stay where you are and keep looking. Barney had a recollection of observing the humanoid forms wearing glossy black uniforms and black caps. Red lights on what appeared to be bat wing fins began to telescope out the sides of the craft, and a long structure descended from the bottom of the craft. The silent craft approached to what Barney estimated was within 50 to 80 feet overhead and 300 feet away from him. On October 21st, 1961, Barney reported to National Investigations Committee on Aerial Phenomena investigator Walter Webb that the beings were somehow not human. So that was just kind of one of the most popular abduction stories.
But like, what do you mean the beings? Like, they never really saw any people.
Yeah, that was kind of the beings being the aliens, I guess, inside the window of the UFO.
Okay, and these people disappeared.
They disappeared?
Yeah, like so there was an abduction. Betty and Barney
Oh
disappeared.
no! They didn't disappear. They were abducted, and then the whatever day on October 21st, Barney reported it to somebody, and yeah, they didn't disappear. They were abducted, and then I guess the aliens put them back. I guess I don't know.
What about their son Bam Bam? What happened to him?
Oh, their dog Densley or whatever, Delsey,
No, Bam Bam.
Bam Bam.
Betty and Betty and
Oh
Barney.
yeah, yeah. Doesn't say anything about Bam Bam or Pebbles.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, yeah. So that was basically what I had. A couple other things is there's this ancient alien show on Netflix that Evelyn and I were watching, and it's actually a really good show. It's basically about this alien comes to destroy. He has like this device on his ship that would destroy basically the whole entire human population. But then he ends up crashing in a storm, and then he takes over this guy's body because he crashed, and then he's trying to get his ship back together. But basically, the entire show is from the perspective of an alien taking over this guy's body and trying to act human. And it's just, it's more of a comedy than anything, just by the way that he talks, and because he lives outside the town of a super small town, and he just talks like somebody, like you would expect an alien to talk as if it were human. Like he talks in very robotic voice. He doesn't understand like high fives or gestures or waving or anything like that. So the whole show is him trying to incorporate himself into human society. It's just a funny show that I thought I would add in there.
What TV or what channel is it on?
It's on Netflix.
And what's it called?
It's called Ancient Alien. Or
Ancient
wait,
Alien.
no, I think it's called Resident. It's called Resident Alien, not Ancient Alien. Yeah, yeah,
Resident.
Resident Alien. It's pretty funny.
So after all of your research and digging farther into this, like, what are your thoughts on this?
I don't know. I try not to get too serious into it. It's cool stuff to think about and theorize, but at the end of the day, if they are real and we can't do anything about it, then we can't do anything about it, and there's no reason that I should look into it further. It's just a fun topic to talk about, I guess.
Explore, talk about. No, that makes
Yeah.
yeah. My biggest, I don't know. I just wish there was more factual evidence to like actually
Yeah.
do stuff with, to where you could actually, kind of talk back and forth and ask deeper questions. Which I
Yeah.
guess if you were maybe interviewing Robert, right? Wasn't that his name that worked at
Yeah. Lazar, Bob
area?
Lazar.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah, yeah, yeah. You could ask deeper questions, and some of these questions
Yeah.
that I have, maybe get them answered.
Yeah, it's unfortunate that I'm not necessarily a super genius scientist that worked on an alien craft, though. So
Yeah,
I kind of.
but like with this, does this make you want to get into a little bit more astrology and dive a little bit deeper into like looking outside of our planet more?
Yeah, I think I've always been super interested in astronomy. It's not necessarily. I don't think. Well, I guess yeah, aliens are interesting to think about, but I think I'm just interested in astronomy in general. Just the fact that planets and some of them have rings and some of them are just completely frozen, and I don't know. It's just super interesting to me
No, yeah.
in general. Like one planet is a complete gaseous giant that's not like there's no water. It's just gas basically. I think that's just fascinating.
Which which planet are you talking about?
Jupiter.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
Because with your telescope that you have, how many planets can you see?
I could see. It's not like okay. So when I saw the rings of Saturn, it's you can actually see the rings, and it's not like okay. If you Google a picture of Saturn, I can't see the rings in that much detail. But I thought it was just super fascinating to me that I could even see the rings. Period. Like you look up in
Yeah.
the sky with your naked eye, and you look and it's just like a bright light, and then you take that telescope and you put a little lens on it to get a good view of where you're at, and then you adjust it and you keep getting more magnified, and eventually you see Saturn with its rings. It's like whoa.
Well, and then that last story that you were telling about Betty and Barney, it was
Yeah.
like she was talking about where Jupiter was. It's like how the hell does she know where Jupiter is?
Yeah.
Like with the naked eye
Yeah.
in 19 what? Like 21?
uh no, it was 1961.
Okay, because I was gonna say, yeah, you said they were driving a 1957 car, and that's
Yeah.
where I was a little confused. But oh, that's where it was. It was 1961,
Mhm.
1919.
Mhm.
Okay, yeah, but it's just like, oh yeah, it was right behind Jupiter. It's like, what the hell?
Yeah.
Like,
Unless she was like an astronomer where she because like you can study the sky and realize okay, these are the constellations, the planets are in this constellation at this time of year, so I know you can use them like directionally to like navigate and stuff like that. But I for some reason I feel this person was not that well versed in astronomy, in being okay, there's Jupiter and it's coming at me from here, and I look at through my binoculars and oh, it's going across the moon like that. It's like I have a pretty good telescope for just a random civilian. Like I don't have a military grade telescope or anything, but I can see the moon. Like I can see the craters and stuff on the moon with like my lowest magnification. But if you took a pair of binoculars, I don't think you'd really be able to see the moon all. I guess I don't know. I've never looked through a good pair of binoculars, but yeah.
well, how good of a pair of binoculars you talking about? Like, that can't be possible, can it?
Yeah, especially in 1961.
Right.
Yeah, it's just fun to think
Okay,
about.
dude. On a side note, the last 30 minutes of this podcast, I've been looking out my window here, and
Yeah.
I realized that one of my neighbors put up a Christmas tree, dude. It is October 20th. We are 65 days until Christmas. Halloween still hasn't came. Still have Thanksgiving, and these people have a Christmas tree up. Like it just like I just had to share that because it's like you talk about these like stories, like, and I'm
Yeah,
not
yeah.
coming up with this, Jake. I will take a picture and send this to you if I have to. But yes, they have their Christmas tree up.
It's the resident alien living in your apartment. They're just trying to fit in with civilization. They just don't know
Yeah,
Christmas hasn't come yet.
yeah. Oh my gosh,
Yep. You're
dude, this
experiencing it.
some things that people do just absolutely blow my mind. Which is just it's just funny. Like to me, it's
Yeah.
funny. It's like okay,
Yeah, yeah.
but no, man, I appreciate you sharing everything that you've learned, and it's important to kind of hear about the things that you've been researching, and so many of these things that I never would have considered or even really thought of.
Hmm.
And it's also interesting just to try to understand the things that take up people's time or what they allow themselves to research and to take up their time. Like
Yeah.
some people in our personalities, going back to personalities, we can get so fascinated with so many different things into what we want to start researching or diving deep into. It's amazing what intrigues people.
Yeah, that's another thing. It's like I'm just interested in what people are interested in. You know what I mean? Like
Yeah.
there's just there's a quote by Alan Watts, I think, and it's like whatever you can be interested in do that because you will find other people that are interested in that no matter what, because people are just there's people interested in everything.
Right. Every small thing. And yeah,
Uh-huh.
like for me, like I'm super interested, or I was at one point, in magic and illusions and stuff like
Yeah.
that, because it's just, it's very, I guess not maybe similar to aliens, but it's like the amount of imagination that your mind has to
Mhm.
create to be like, what in the world just happened? Like, I
Yeah.
know that this didn't really happen,
But it
but it
seems like it
sure
did.
looks like it happened.
Yeah.
Yeah. And
Yeah.
how did they make that happen? Because that's amazing. And so then you go out in the real world and you see, just like, you think that this magic just happens all over,
Mhm.
when sometimes your minds are so prepared because of what you saw happen back there, to where it's like, no, that didn't just happen. It's an illusion that your mind has created because of some of the other things that you've seen.
Mhm.
Like after researching all this alien stuff, have you ever been out to the, like, in the real world, and your mind's been like more receptive? It's like, oh my gosh, was that an alien? Like, was that an alien? Like, where you're
Yeah.
almost getting a little bit paranoid about it. It'd be like, oh my gosh, I think that was an alien. Like, I
Yeah.
just saw it. Like, after renting a Jeep this week, like, I never realized how
How
many
many
other
Jeeps?
people,
Yeah.
yeah,
That's
there,
how I
how
was
many
with
other
my
Jeeps
car
there are
too.
and stuff.
Yeah.
What?
That's how I was with my car too when I got it.
Really?
It's like yeah, you don't see that other people are driving that car until you get that car and it's like, "Hey, that's my car." And then you see it everywhere. It's just you're not looking for it.
100%.
Yeah.
Yeah. Like,
Yep.
I just never realized, which I actually want to get it, buy a Jeep after having a one, renting one.
Yeah.
But it's amazing. Like, I think that there are more Jeep owners down here in South Florida than just about any other car.
Oh
Like,
yeah.
just today, yeah, there's so many Jeeps. It blows my mind, dude.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
And what's cool is that we live in a climate where it's not like you can go off-roading, but during flood season, Jeeps that are lifted are really, really nice to have, because
Oh
you're not
yeah.
going to get flooded out or anything like that. And I mean, it makes a lot of sense, where a lot of people would think, well, why would you have a Jeep in Florida? It's like, well, for rainy season, for one thing, like,
Yeah.
that's one reason.
That would be
Um,
nice. Yeah, that makes
yeah.
sense.
But with aliens, you have anything else to share? Is there anything else you want to say?
I think that's kind of the general synopsis of what I had.
Okay. So
Yeah.
I'll share a story this week about dad.
Okay.
And so this has to do, the first episode of this was going to baseball games. So during travel baseball, I think when I was probably 12, 13-year old, there was a league called Sandy Koufax, and dad would always drive me there, and he would take, some of the people on the team, their parents wouldn't be coming as early, or they wouldn't be able to travel. So there would usually be someone who would ride with us. And dad would drink a lot of pop, and so we're driving down the road, and dad didn't really know how to get there. This is before Google Maps and stuff, so you'd have to
Yeah.
kind of just follow everybody else. And so dad has to go pee, and he just pulls out his little coffee cup, or his what is it? What was the marathon, or gas station,
Oh yeah,
32
yeah.
ouncer? And
Okay.
he just starts whizzing in that, like, with the baseball teammate in the back. And I'm just like, I was so embarrassed. But like, that kid, he just, like, it was just like, what in the heck is going on here? Like, it was something he had never experienced or anything like that. But like, in our family, it was just something that was super normal. And
Oh
that's one thing
yeah.
about dad. We're like, he was not really embarrassed by anything. He didn't really have a filter either. And it was just like, okay, well, here we go. Like, I'm sure we'll share other stories about, walking into I don't want to share more than one story, but yeah.
Right.
So it was just like, that was something that just always makes me laugh. It's just like, oh my gosh, dude. Like,
Yeah.
that's which it comes in handy, man.
Oh
You got to go
yeah.
to the bathroom. It's always nice to have a piss cup
Mm-hmm.
in the
And
car.
and yeah, and a similar story to that. When I worked at the rat farm, okay, so there was two different barns and only one barn had a bathroom. So, if you were working in the barn that didn't have a bathroom, basically everybody would go pee in the auger where you would take all of the used bedding and all the rat turds and everything, and you would dump them into there. And there was an auger that spun it out and pushed it outside, and then it would be collected for manure or whatever. whatever later. And basically, that was the spot to take a whiz. And my friend Peyton, he started working at the rat farm. And on his first day there, I was up front. I was kind of showing him what to do, and he looked back and he saw one of the guys. He saw one of the guys with his legs spread, and hands down at his waist, and he's looking down towards his crotch, and he's like, "Is that guy pissing right there?" And I was like, "Yeah, he is." He's like, "What the hell's going on?" He's just taking a piss in the middle of work, and it's just like it's something that we were so used to, just because it's like all dudes that worked there, and it was just something we were so used to that it's like, yeah, I guess I don't understand how funny that is, but it just made you step back and think about it, and that just reminded me of that.
No, yeah, 100%. Like again, like sometimes there's just so many things that seem so outlandish to an outsider
Yeah.
on the outside when it's just normal to everybody else inside. And then I'm assuming at some point he was just part of the group and that
Yep.
he did the exact same thing, right?
I don't think he ever did, but
Oh, really?
yeah, no, I don't think he ever did.
He was just so disgusted with that. And it was
Yeah.
just like so off-putting. I'm
Yeah.
never going to piss in the auger. I'm
Yeah.
a gentleman, and I'm going to go walk over to the other building and always use the proper restroom.
Yep.
That's awesome. All right. Well, everybody, thanks for joining. We hope you enjoyed this week's episode on Jake's expertise in aliens. And
Yeah.
thanks for sharing all your knowledge and wisdom, Jake.
Oh yeah, for sure. Thanks for listening and having questions.
You're welcome. Peace
All right.
out, homies.
See you later, everybody.